Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
It's funny in researching topics for this podcast. I'm always looking for different things. Obviously, we might return to some topics, but I try to bring up new stuff. And so I'm looking through topics for today's topic, set of topics to talk about. And one was a showstopper because it directly affects us this time. And this is that. Microsoft's going to be shutting down Skype from May 5th, and obviously I read that, and obviously I thought, all right, we're talking about that, but then I was spinning around thinking, all right, now I'm going to have to figure out a new workflow mechanism. Not that it'd be that difficult because we've actually experimented in the past with a few other different options like Zoom. Funny enough, WebRTC, I think that we used for a couple of months. That link and everything related to it doesn't seem to work anymore. But I think that was a bit of a beta pilot type scenario thing anyway, I think, from memory. But there's also obviously we'll transition to something, and as we were saying before we got on recording this, that we'll have a bit of a play around and test a few different apps to see what works best for us, etc. But part of me was like, oh, this is like a real shame too, because I feel like I've had Skype installed forever on whatever device I've had for as long as I can remember, probably from the 2000s onwards. It's been a bit of a mainstay. Yeah, it's got its quirks or whatever, but it's been nice and reliable, at least for what we're doing as well. I've enjoyed using it mainly because it's quite simple hit call, we connect. I just have to, record the screen, and I get like a decent video capture, which I can then, splice you in. So we've got a bit of a, split screen going with our discussion. And I find that I don't have to do too much to the video in post to, really boost it. And that's one of the things I'll be looking for with the use of these, an alternative app, a replacement app when we finally get there, that hopefully we can find something that will have that user friendliness, I guess.
Yeah, well, I wonder... I've always wondered this about Skype, certainly in the latter years of us using it, and Skype sort of seemingly to be, almost an appendix in the anatomy of the internet. But if you go right back to the start, I remember it was a big project. I can't remember if it came out of Sweden or somewhere like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, but it was the first... Well, I think it was the only other peer-to-peer internet service ever created en masse, effectively the same as email. And that's because it was built in a PC era, not the post-PC era, but it was built in a time when we're all on dial-up modems and trying to get a little matchbox-sized, image of someone and hear them talking somewhere else. And I think from memory, for me anyway, the two options were Messenger, which was very Microsoft.
As in that's the Microsoft version, not the Facebook version, which didn't exist back then.
That's right, the original Microsoft Messenger, which was really marginal, and I think I could get it 120 by 80 screen size or something on it. It wasn't very big. And then Skype came out, and Skype sort of revolutionised it. I think that sort of communication. And everyone got very excited at that time because that was, wow, you talk to anyone in the world face to face.
Well, that's the thing. It's the first true working, at least for me, in terms of the experience that I remember of video calling. And obviously there's audio calling in there as well. And it's... just putting it into context, that I actually don't know if that was a thing that a lot of people did back then, as in a mainstream way, because, we take it for granted now, I guess, Apple obviously didn't invent it, but obviously FaceTime, when that was introduced, I think back with the iPhone 4, as I recall, which was 2010. From that point on, it became video calling became more of a mainstay. for the masses, because and I guess there's a couple of reasons for that, because Skype was always on computers, if you weren't as interested in having to deal with a computer, it's not something you were going to gravitate towards pretty quickly. Whereas if it was on your phone, which is something you carry around and it's just tap a button and away you go, that made it a lot easier for people. But that's the thing that I remember, that it was something that was a very useful tool, and I'm kind of sad that it's going to be sailing off into the sunset of tech history.
Well, it is sad, and you make probably a fairly good point there, because the bit about the computers, well, actually it was desktop computers that could run it. Don't think laptops really had the power in those early years, and then you needed to be plugged in anyway, so because you needed the bandwidth, which in Australia at that point was just about non-existent anyway. So it had a lot against it, and I think its model generally went towards competing with the telcos at one point, where the idea was it could compete against the networks themselves. But as you say, once the iPhone came along, FaceTime, and then all of the other sort of apps that we enjoy now, its relevance has certainly, I guess, drifted. But what I do find interesting is that now that we talk about how long it's been around, and it really took COVID to make this format popular.
Exactly. Just a couple of other points in the history that I found interesting was eBay's brief ownership of Skype, where they flipped it for, I think, about $6 billion. So that was a nice little tidy profit that they made. I think that it was about $2 billion they acquired it for, and they flipped it to Microsoft for $8 billion. And obviously there was some articles around then that given where Skype's gone under Microsoft, that did they overpay for it or something. But I don't think it's got to do with that. I think Microsoft was clearly wanting some sort of, I'm sure they would have had a lot of smart people there that figured out that they needed their own version, which has now metastasized, if you want to call it, into Microsoft Teams, and which is, it does a good job for what it does. So I'm not going to berate it for that. I have to use it every day, so that's fine. But I think that from a branding perspective, they've got Microsoft 365, they've got Teams as part of the suite. Teams works with all the other Microsoft apps, and they've got built-in connections, etc. So it might have just been that Skype became redundant from their perspective and use, not necessarily from a user perspective, but more for their strategy for what they wanted to do with this type of functionality.
Oh, I think that's unquestionably true. I think COVID really killed Skype. At that point, when Zoom came out, which was the modern version, browser-based, Microsoft had to respond. It took them a couple of years, but they got there in the end with Teams. So, and I think, while I'll be sad to see Skype go, I can totally understand. I wouldn't be able to tell you what its real place is, apart from us doing this podcast.
Maybe we're like the final users, let's put it that way. Maybe like the episode before May 5th, we do one last hurrah with Skype or something.
We should.
Absolutely. All right, just changing topics, just because obviously we covered different things here, and this is more in the health space again. I think we've had a little bit of a run of that recently, but and this isn't the first time I've heard this, but the studies finding that rather than this idea that humans age, I guess, progressively over time, which I guess we do, but that there are two sharp peaks during our lifetimes where aging accelerates, which they roughly calculate to be somewhere in the mid-40s, and then again maybe 60, early 60s as well. I found that quite fascinating in terms of that. Whether you feel that or not, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't know, maybe you start groaning more after 45 or something. I'm not entirely sure there.
Didn't Friends do an episode on that? Well, I think for a couple of guys like us who are, soon to move into our 40s, this sort of news really makes you consider what's going to happen. It's interesting to think, isn't it? Because these days, 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new 30, 60 is the new 35, 70 is the new 40. I think our concept of aging has changed, but obviously the physiology of aging hasn't changed. So it's very true, and there must be some fascinating data around this, both from the study, and this is a great study. Just to be able to track this and to be able to say, well, yeah, actually there are periods. And this will mean that the longevity scientists out there will be focusing on these areas. Why does this happen at this time, and how do we unlock that? And that's the question. But I wonder how this works now in an age where I think age is almost becoming disposable, and in our minds you're actually 30 all the way to 70, and then then you age rapidly at 70. So I wonder if this becomes something that's more known or accepted by society, that whether we adopt these physiological points in future, or whether we just go with the cosmetic surgery until we can't anymore.
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? The thing that obviously that comes to mind too is that as each year progresses, medicine really improves, and health advice, I guess, improves, and all that sort of thing. So, it's not just about the length of time that you're alive, it's also how healthy you stay for longer, which is something that's definitely improved, over, a relatively short space of time, really, because, it wasn't really that long ago, just go back 100 years, where it you wouldn't have lasted as long, potentially, as what you do now, or at least the chance to last as long as what you can now. And the other thing, of course, just on the, how society kind of picks it up, I was reading another article about, I think it was George Clooney, saying that he'd just passed 60 or whatever, and he's saying, I still feel like I'm doing everything like I'm 30, like I'm shooting hoops and doing all that stuff, but
that's right.
But maybe when I'm 90, that's like a hard number, and maybe I won't be shooting hoops at 90, so maybe we should get cracking and doing as much as we can while we still have our health, so to speak.
Well, this is a really interesting topic, I think, because, this idea that we're all 30 now forever until we turn 70 or 90 or whenever, it is, to me, I find it fascinating. And the idea that people would, like George Clooney's, sure, we participate at that age, but I'm sure we must be a little bit slower or not quite as sharp. And yet there's potential there for that to change in future. There's potential for, with the advances in medicine and longevity science, that, we may even be able to significantly slow these two aging points in the 40s and 60s, if you know where they are. In which case, then that could mean that we might carry on as if we were 35 all the way to 90.
Oh, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? And I must say, Clooney's doing a really good job of that, because he still looks like, I didn't pick he was 60 when I was watching an interview of him the other day. He was certainly looking very sharp, but I'm sure he's got some other things working for him in that respect.
He and Tom, all natural. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. And yeah, I guess we'll have to go contemplate a Skype alternative over the next little while. I'm sure we'll be able to solve this particular riddle.
I'm sure we will before we run out of, feed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Alrighty, so that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.